Humanity abandoned the Galactic Council and everything collapsed. Part 1. The stars above Earth had never looked so quiet. From the observation deck of the Geneva Spire, Daniel Shaw watched the night sky with tired eyes. He was not a soldier, not a general, not even a politician by nature. He was a diplomat, trained to speak carefully, to weigh every word, to find compromise where none seemed possible. But tonight there would be no compromise. Tonight he would say the words that would change everything. For over 300 years, humanity had been part of the Galactic Council, a vast assembly of more than 200 alien species that governed trade, peace, and law across the known galaxy. At first it had seemed like a dream come true. After centuries of war and division on Earth, humanity had finally reached the stars and been welcomed into a grand community of civilizations. But over time the dream had soured. The Council spoke of unity, but its decisions always favored the oldest and most powerful members. Human colonies on the edge of known space were left defenseless while Council fleets protected richer, older worlds. Requests for aid against pirate raids were ignored. Proposals for fairer resource sharing were dismissed with polite condescension. And then came the Veln. The Veln were not members of the Council. They were raiders, fast, brutal, and relentless. They struck without warning, burning outposts, enslaving survivors, and vanishing into the dark between stars. Human frontier settlements bore the brunt of their attacks. When Earth begged the Council for help, the response was cold. "You chose to expand into unstable regions," the Council speaker had said during a closed session. "You must bear the consequences." That was the final straw. Now standing before the full Council chamber on Xylos Prime, Daniel Shaw adjusted his collar and activated the universal translator. Thousands of alien eyes watched him, some curious, some annoyed, most indifferent. He took a slow breath. 312 years ago, humanity joined this council in good faith, he began, his voice calm but firm. "We believed in your promise of peace, cooperation, and mutual protection. We gave our resources, our knowledge, and the lives of our people to uphold that promise." He paused. The chamber remained silent. "But you have broken that promise. You have ignored our pleas. You have allowed our people to suffer while you protected your own. You speak of unity, yet you treat us as lesser. You call us allies, but you act as if we are servants." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some species shifted in their seats. Others leaned forward, sensing something unprecedented. "Therefore," Daniel continued, "as of this moment, the Terran Alliance formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. All diplomatic ties are severed. All trade agreements are nullified. All joint military operations are terminated. We will no longer participate in your assemblies, abide by your rulings, or contribute to your systems." Gasps echoed through the hall. A few delegates stood in protest, but Daniel did not flinch. "This is not an act of war," he said. "It is an act of survival. We will defend our worlds. We will protect our people. And we will no longer wait for you to decide whether we are worth saving." He turned off his mic and walked out of the chamber without looking back. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. In cities, towns, and space stations across the Sol system, people gathered around public screens, in cafes, in ship mess halls, watching the broadcast replay. Some were afraid. Others were angry. But many, especially those who had lost family to Veln raids, felt something they hadn't in years: hope. On Mars, in the dusty repair bay of New Ares shipyards, Lena Ortiz wiped grease from her hands and stared at the flickering screen. She had lost her younger brother 2 years ago, when a Veln strike team hit the Helios mining outpost. The Council had called it an unfortunate but unavoidable loss. Lena had called it betrayal. Now, hearing Daniel's words, she felt a strange lightness in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. In orbit around Jupiter, Chris Bell floated inside the maintenance tunnel of a cargo freighter, tightening a loose conduit. His comm crackled with chatter from the bridge. "Did you hear?" his co-pilot asked. "We're out." Just like that, Chris didn't answer right away. He finished his work, sealed the panel, and pushed off toward the airlock. He thought about the last shipment they delivered to a Council depot. Medical supplies for a war-torn planet that never got them. He thought about the extra taxes Earth had paid for galactic stability, while human colonies went without basic defenses. He smiled faintly. Good. Let them figure it out on their own. Not everyone agreed with the decision. In the halls of the United Earth Senate, debates raged. Some feared economic collapse. Others warned of retaliation. But President Elena Diaz stood firm. "We have spent centuries proving our loyalty," she told the press. "Now it's time to prove our strength." Within hours, Earth's space defense grid shifted to full alert. Civilian freighters rerouted away from Council-controlled lanes. All data links to Xylos Prime were severed. The great machine of human interstellar activity, once woven tightly into the Council's network, began to pull free, strand by strand. Alien news networks buzzed with speculation. "Humanity is making a mistake," declared a Cathari analyst. "They cannot survive alone." A Zen philosopher mused that humans were too emotional, too impulsive for galactic politics. Few believed Earth would last more than a year without Council support. But down in the shipyards, the factories, the orbital farms, and the quiet homes of ordinary people, something else was happening. People were working harder. Engineers redesigned old systems to run without Council parts. Farmers optimized hydroponic crops to feed more with less. Pilots trained longer, studied deeper, prepared for a future with no safety net. On Luna, Maya Ruiz sat in the cockpit of her Mark 9 interceptor, running diagnostics. She was only 23, but she'd already logged more flight hours than most veterans. Her instructor had told her, "The Council won't save you out there. Only you will." She'd hated that line until now. Now it felt like truth. Far from the headlines and the speeches, in a small workshop on the edge of Titan's methane sea, retired strategist Owen Grant poured himself a cup of synthetic coffee and watched the stars through a cracked viewport. He'd served in the early days of Human Council cooperation. He'd seen the promises, the handshakes, the slow erosion of trust. He'd warned them. No one listened. Now, as he sipped his bitter drink, he whispered to the empty room, "They'll learn what happens when you take the linchpin out of the machine." And across the galaxy, in 1,000 worlds that had taken humanity for granted, the first cracks began to show. Trade routes stuttered. Supply chains frayed. Panic, quiet at first, started to spread. But on Earth, Mars, Luna, and every human outpost among the stars, people looked up, not with fear, but with quiet determination. They had walked away from the table, not because they wanted to be alone, but because they refused to be used. The stars were quiet, but humanity was just getting started. Humanity abandoned the Galactic Council and everything collapsed. Part 2. 6 months after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, the galaxy began to come apart at the seams. At first, the changes were small. Delays in shipments, minor disputes between member worlds, a few trade tariffs quietly raised. But like a crack in a dam, what started small soon grew too wide to ignore. Without humanity's massive industrial output, its advanced fusion reactors, its fleet of fast-response cargo haulers, and its network of deep space relay stations, the Council's carefully balanced system started to wobble. The first major sign of trouble came when the Cathari hegemony, a proud and militaristic species that had long resented human influence in border regions, moved troops into the neutral Viridian corridor. The Council demanded they withdraw. The Cathari refused. In the past, a joint human-Cathari peacekeeping force would have been sent to defuse the situation. But now, with no human ships to back up the threat, the Council's words carried little weight. Within weeks, the Cathari seized 3 key mining stations, cutting off a vital source of rare metals used in starship construction across the galaxy. Panic spread. The Zen Collective, which controlled most of the galaxy's antimatter fuel refineries, announced it would halt exports until stability returned. But stability never came. Without fuel, civilian transport stalled. Medical supply ships couldn't reach distant colonies. Food rotted in orbit while hungry populations waited below. Meanwhile, Earth watched but did not act. President Elena Diaz had made it clear, humanity would not rejoin the Council, nor would it prop up a broken system. Instead, Earth enacted what became known as the Silent Shield policy. All human-controlled space was sealed off with layered defense grids. Independent wormhole routes, long considered too risky for regular use, were quietly mapped and secured by civilian pilots working with retired Navy officers. Factories on Mars and Ceres shifted production from luxury exports to essential goods. Water recyclers, medical kits, shield generators. Humanity was preparing not for war but for survival. On Luna, young pilot Maya Ruiz spent her days in simulators, training for scenarios no one had ever faced before. Her instructors no longer taught standard council battle drills. Instead, they ran exercises based on real-time intel from the Outer Rim, raider movements, refugee ship distress calls, sudden blackouts in communication lanes. Maya learned to fly alone, to make decisions in seconds, to trust her instincts more than any central command. She missed the old days sometimes, the certainty, the structure, but she also felt something new. Purpose. Back on Mars, Lena Ortiz worked double shifts in the new Ares shipyards. With council-certified parts no longer available, engineers like her had to improvise. She rewired old navigation cores using salvaged drone circuitry. She patched hull breaches with composite foam developed for asteroid mining. Nothing was perfect, but everything worked. And every ship she helped repair carried supplies to human colonies or rescued stranded civilians, human or not, from failing outposts. She didn't do it for praise. She did it because it was right. In the quiet corridors of the Titan Research Hub, retired strategist Owen Grant monitored galactic news feeds with growing satisfaction. He saw the Cathari overreach, the Zen hoarding, the smaller species turning on each other for scraps. He saw what he'd always known. The Council hadn't been holding the galaxy together through wisdom or fairness. It had been held together by human labor, human innovation, and human restraint. Take that away and the whole thing began to crumble, yet not all humans agreed with the silence. Some argued they should offer aid even if the Council wouldn't admit fault. Others feared that isolation would make them targets. But the government held firm. Aid would be given, but only through neutral zones, only to those who asked without conditions, and never through official Council channels. One such request came from the planet Virelis, home to the gentle, amphibious Anthari. Their world had been cut off when a Council freighter abandoned its route. Their medical stations were running out of antibiotics. Their children were getting sick. A Anthari elder sent a simple message, broadcast on open frequency. We do not ask as Council members, we ask as neighbors. Within 48 hours, a human cargo vessel, unmarked, unarmed, flying under civilian registry, dropped out of warp near Virelis. It delivered medicine, water purifiers, and seeds for fast-growing nutrient crops. Then it left without fanfare, without demands. The Anthari wept. For the first time, they realized humanity hadn't abandoned the galaxy. It had simply refused to be used by it. On Earth, in a small apartment in Chicago, engineer Jake Miller watched the news clip of the aid drop. He had spent the last month converting old freight drones into autonomous supply carriers. He hadn't slept much. His hands were calloused, his eyes tired. But seeing the Anthari children smile through the screen made it worth it. He turned to his sister and said, "We're not the bad guys. We never were." As chaos deepened elsewhere, human space grew quieter, more organized. Power grids stayed online. Food distribution remained steady. Schools taught not just science and math, but crisis response and community care. People checked on their neighbors. Volunteers trained in emergency medicine. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional, and that was more than most of the galaxy could say. Then came the raid. A Veln strike force, larger than any seen before, hit the former Council world of Oris 9. The planet had once been protected by a joint human Council fleet. Now, with no one to stop them, the Veln burned cities, enslaved thousands, and looted everything of value. Refugees fled in any ship that could fly, many heading toward human-controlled space, hoping for sanctuary. Earth's borders remained closed, but not heartless. Neutral rescue stations were activated near the edge of Sol system. Medical teams stood by. Food and water were stockpiled. No one was turned away, but no one was promised citizenship either. "Help, yes," said a public broadcast from President Diaz. "But we will not be dragged back into a system that failed everyone." On the bridge of a rescue freighter near Saturn, Jake Miller, now wearing a patched flight jacket and a tired smile, welcomed his first group of non-human refugees aboard. They were scared, exhausted, speaking in broken universal. He handed them blankets, warm broth, and a simple phrase in their own tongue, which he'd practiced all night. "You're safe now." Back on Luna, Maya Ruiz received new orders. Not to fight, not yet, but to patrol the Outer Rim, to watch, to listen, The galaxy was falling apart, and somewhere in the silence between the stars, humanity was quietly proving that strength wasn't about control. It was about choice, and they had chosen to stand alone, not out of pride, but so others might one day learn to stand on their own. Humanity abandoned the Galactic Council and everything collapsed. Part 3. A year had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council, and the galaxy was no longer just unstable, it was broken. What began as scattered conflicts and supply shortages had spiraled into full collapse. The great capital world of Xylos Prime, once gleaming with towers of light and diplomacy, now burned under the weight of its own chaos. Riots filled the streets. The council chamber stood empty, its doors sealed shut by order of no one and everyone. Species that had shared star charts for centuries now pointed weapons at each other over scraps of fuel and food. The dream of unity had turned to dust. The final blow came not from war but from silence. When the last official council broadcast cut out mid-sentence, replaced only by static, the truth was clear. There was no more council. No central command, no shared law. Just 200 species adrift in the dark, trying to survive without the system they had all depended on, even as they abused it. Humanity watched from a distance, not with glee, but with quiet sorrow. Earth had warned them, again and again, but no one had listened until it was too late. Now refugees poured toward human space by the millions. Ships of every shape and origin, some sleek and proud, others patched together with hope and wire, drifted near the edges of Sol system, broadcasting pleas in a dozen languages. They did not ask for council protection. They asked for human mercy, and humanity, against all predictions, gave it. Not by reopening borders or rejoining old alliances, but by doing what it had always done best, helping without demanding. Neutral aid zones were set up near Jupiter's moons and the asteroid belt. Medical teams worked around the clock. Engineers like Lena Ortiz helped repair alien vessels using human tools and universal schematics. On the icy surface of Europa, field hospitals treated wounded from a dozen species, their beds side by side, their pain the same. One of those medics was Ben Carter. He had been a civilian doctor on Mars before the collapse. Now he worked in a pressurized dome on Ganymede, stitching wounds, calming frightened children, and learning to say breathe in 5 different tongues. He didn't care if his patients were former council envoys or simple farmers from forgotten worlds. To him, they were just people who needed help, and helping them felt like the most human thing he'd ever done. Back on Earth, President Elena Diaz faced mounting pressure. Some advisors urged her to seal the system completely. "We can't save everyone," they said. Others whispered that this was their chance to rebuild the galaxy, with humanity in charge. But Diaz refused both paths. "We don't want to rule," she told her cabinet. "We want to show that you don't need to rule to be strong." Her words spread, not through official channels, but through refugee stories, through repaired ships, through quiet acts of kindness that traveled faster than any warship. On a drifting cargo barge near Neptune, a Cathari warrior who had once mocked human weakness accepted a cup of hot broth from a teenage volunteer named Priya. He didn't speak. He just nodded. That nod meant more than any treaty. Meanwhile, the Veln grew bolder. With no council fleet to stop them, they swept through the former core worlds like a storm. They took Oris 9, then Helva Minor, then the Zen fuel depots. Entire populations vanished into slavery. The galaxy's remaining powers were too busy fighting each other to unite against the real threat. But humanity was watching. In hidden shipyards beyond Pluto, engineers worked on new designs. Faster engines, smarter shields, weapons that didn't just destroy but disabled. Young strategist Naomi Wright, barely 30 but sharp as a laser, studied Veln attack patterns. She noticed something others had missed. The raiders always struck where resistance was weakest, never where it was strongest. They were bullies, not conquerors, and bullies could be stopped if someone stood up to them. On Luna, Maya Ruiz finally got her orders. Not to patrol, not to observe, to prepare. Her squadron was assigned to a new class of interceptor, sleek, silent, built for speed and precision. She trained harder than ever, not for glory, but because she knew lives depended on her skill. She thought of the refugee children she'd seen on the news feeds. She thought of her brother, lost years ago to a Veln raid no one had stopped. This time someone would. At the Titan Research Hub, Owen Grant reviewed intelligence reports with grim focus. He saw the Veln massing near the ruins of Xylos Prime. He saw the fear spreading through the outer colonies. And he saw something else, a chance. Not to take over, but to prove that cooperation didn't require control. He sent a single message to President Diaz. The time is coming. We must be ready, not as saviors, but as partners. The message was understood. On the frontier colony of EO7, Jake Miller stood on a landing pad, watching as a damaged freighter from the Anthari descended through the clouds. He had turned the colony's old storage bays into emergency shelters. Now he coordinated rescue runs with pilots from 3 different species, all flying human-made ships, all following human protocols, but none under human command. It was messy, it was imperfect, but it worked. When the Anthari captain stepped onto the platform, her webbed hands trembling, Jake didn't offer a speech. He just handed her a data pad with coordinates to the nearest medical bay and said, "Your people are safe here." She looked at him, eyes wide with disbelief. "Why do you help us?" she asked. "We did nothing for you when you needed us." Jake shrugged. "Maybe that's why we're still here." As night fell over EO7, lights glowed in every window. Humans and aliens shared meals, repaired ships together, and taught each other songs from their homeworlds. There were no flags, no anthems, no council decrees, just people choosing to care for one another because it was right. Far away on a dark world near the galactic rim, the Veln gathered their fleet. They believed the galaxy was theirs for the taking. They did not know that while they burned cities, humanity had been building something stronger than walls or weapons. They had been building trust. And soon, that trust would become a shield, not just for Earth, but for everyone who still believed in a better way. Humanity abandoned the Galactic Council and everything collapsed. Part 4. The Veln did not knock. They came like fire in the night, sudden, hungry, and without mercy. Their fleet, larger than any seen before, struck the ruins of Xylos Prime with brutal force. What little remained of the old capital was crushed beneath their warships. Then they moved outward, burning every world that dared to resist. Panic spread faster than their plasma cannons. Species that had once argued over trade routes now fled in the same broken ships, whispering one name in fear, Veln. But this time, someone answered, from the edge of human space. A signal went out, not a declaration of war, but a simple message broadcast on every open frequency. If you stand with us, we stand with you. It was signed not by a president or a general, but by a group calling itself the Free Alliance. No flags, no demands, just an offer. And one by one, survivors said yes. Humanity did not return as the Council's savior. It came as an equal, armed, ready, and working alongside those who had lost everything. Earth's fleets moved not to conquer but to protect. Their ships, sleek and fast, carried crews of humans and aliens side by side. On the bridge of the lead vessel, young strategist Naomi Wright coordinated attacks not from a command throne, but from a shared console, listening to pilots from 5 different species as they reported enemy positions in real time. The Veln had never faced anything like it. They expected fear, they expected division. Instead, they found unity, forged not by law but by choice. On the battle-scarred moon of Tarsus, medic Ben Carter worked in a field hospital built inside a repurposed cargo hangar. Wounded soldiers of a dozen species lay on cots, their injuries treated with human medicine and alien techniques. A Cathari warrior with a plasma burn on his arm shared water with a small bird-like Zen scout. No one spoke of old grudges. There was no time. Ben moved between them, his hand steady, his voice calm. He didn't wear a uniform. He didn't need to. His presence alone was a promise. You will not be left behind. Back in Sol System, engineers like Lena Ortiz worked day and night to keep the supply lines open. Human freighters now flying under the Free Alliance banner delivered weapons, food, and medicine to the front lines. But these were not the old council ships, slow and dependent on central control. These were agile, modular vessels that could be repaired with parts from any world. Lena had helped design the new docking clamps herself, universal, simple, strong. If it works for us, it should work for them, she'd said. And it did. In orbit above Mars, Maya Ruiz led her squadron into their first real battle. Her Mark 9 interceptor danced through enemy fire, weaving between Veln fighters with precision that stunned even her own wingmates. She didn't fly for glory. She flew for the refugee camp on EOS 7, for the children who slept safer because someone was watching the sky. When her targeting system locked onto a Veln command ship, she didn't hesitate. One clean shot. The ship spun out, disabled but not destroyed, just as the new rules of engagement required. "We stop them," Naomi had explained during briefing. "We don't become them." And they didn't. Humanity's tactics were different. Instead of massive fleet battles that left planets in ruins, they used hit-and-fade strikes, electronic warfare, and decoy signals to confuse the enemy. They targeted engines, not cities. They rescued prisoners, not just territory. And when a Veln raider ship was boarded, its crew was taken alive, not for torture, but for questioning, then offered a choice: stand down or face justice. Some chose to stand down. On the front lines, Jake Miller coordinated ground support from a mobile command post on the surface of Helva Minor. He wasn't a soldier, but his knowledge of logistics made him invaluable. He rerouted power grids, set up emergency comms, and helped local militias organize using human-made drones for reconnaissance. One evening, as he shared a meal with a group of former Zen refinery workers turned fighters, one of them asked, "Why do you risk so much for us?" Jake looked at the stars above, then back at the tired but determined faces around him. "Because no one helped us when we needed it," he said, "and I don't want anyone else to feel that alone." Word of humanity's actions spread, not through propaganda but through deeds. A human medic saving a Cathari child, a human engineer rebuilding a Zen water purifier, a human pilot shielding a refugee convoy with her own ship. These stories traveled faster than any warship, lighting a spark in places long thought lost. Even Owen Grant, watching from his quiet post on Titan, allowed himself a rare smile. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched species betray each other for power. But this was something new. Not a return to the old ways, but the birth of something better. "They're learning," he murmured to the empty room. Finally, they're learning. The tide turned not with a single victory, but with 1,000 small ones. The Veln, used to easy prey, grew frustrated. Their raids failed. Their prisoners escaped. Their ships were tracked, outmaneuvered, and disabled. They had expected a broken galaxy. Instead, they found one healing, slowly, painfully, but together. And at the heart of it all was humanity, not leading from above, but standing shoulder to shoulder with those who had once looked down on them. As the last Veln fleet retreated into the outer dark, the Free Alliance did not cheer. There was no parade, no grand speech, only quiet relief, shared meals, and the sound of tools repairing what war had broken, because the real work was just beginning. Humanity abandoned the Galactic Council and everything collapsed. Part 5. The war was over. The Veln had been driven back into the void beyond known space, their fleet shattered, their will broken. The stars, once filled with fear, now held a fragile quiet. But peace was not the same as healing. Across the galaxy, worlds lay in ruins. Families were scattered. Trust had been burned away like old metal in a forge. And yet from the ashes, something new began to grow. Not because someone demanded it, but because people chose it. Near the rings of Saturn, where icy particles drifted like silent witnesses, representatives from over 100 species gathered aboard a neutral station built by human and alien hands together. There were no thrones, no raised platforms, no symbols of old power. Just a wide circular chamber with simple chairs, soft lighting, and a single table made from reclaimed ship plating. At its center sat a data core humming softly, the first draft of a new agreement. President Elena Diaz stood not at the head of the table, but among the others. She wore no uniform, only a plain gray coat. When she spoke, her voice was calm, clear, and carried no hint of triumph. "We are not here to rebuild the council," she said. "We are here to build something that will not fall the same way." The proposal was simple. No single species would hold permanent power. Leadership would rotate every cycle. Decisions would require consensus, not majority rule. Every member would contribute fairly. Resources, knowledge, defense, but no one would be forced to give more than they could bear. And most importantly, any species could leave at any time without punishment, without shame. Freedom to join, Diaz said, must include freedom to walk away. Many were skeptical. Old habits die hard. The Cathari worried about losing influence. The Zen feared sharing their fuel technology. But then a small voice spoke up. It was the Anthari elder who had sent the first plea for help a year before. Humanity could have turned us away, she said, her voice trembling but strong. They did not. They gave us medicine, not demands. If they can trust us, why can we not trust each other? Silence followed. Then one by one, species agreed. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. On Mars, in the new Ares shipyards, Lena Ortiz watched the live feed from Saturn on a cracked wall screen. Around her, workers paused their tasks. Humans, Cathari, even a few former Veln prisoners who had chosen to help rebuild. No one cheered. They just nodded, as if confirming something they already knew in their hearts. Lena wiped her hands on her coveralls and went back to welding a new cargo frame. The work mattered more than the words. In orbit, Maya Ruiz flew a quiet patrol near the edge of Sol system. Her interceptor was clean, her sensors calm. No enemy signals, just stars, silence, and the steady hum of her ship. She thought of her brother, lost long ago to a galaxy that refused to care. She thought of the children she'd seen on Tarsus safe because someone finally stood up. She smiled faintly, then turned her ship toward home. On the moon of Tarsus, Ben Carter packed his medical kit. The field hospital was closing. The wounded were healing. Some had already returned to their worlds. Others chose to stay, helping rebuild what was broken. As he loaded supplies onto a shuttle, a young Cathari boy ran up to him holding out a carved stone figure, a warrior with healing hands. Ben knelt, took it gently, and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. No words were needed. Far out near Pluto, in a hidden shipyard humming with quiet activity, engineers tested a new class of vessel, one designed not for war, but for travel, trade, and rescue. Jake Miller stood on the observation deck, watching as the first prototype powered up its engines. It bore no weapons, only wide cargo bays and modular labs. This one's for the future, he said to no one in particular, not the past. And on Titan, in his small workshop by the methane sea, Owen Grant poured himself a cup of synthetic coffee and watched the treaty signing through a flickering screen. He saw species that had once sneered at humanity now shaking hands with human delegates. He saw hope, not loud or flashy, but steady like a heartbeat. He took a slow sip, set the cup down, and whispered, "You did it. Not by taking over, by showing the way." Back on Earth, in a quiet park in Chicago, children played under real sunlight. Some were human, some were not. They chased each other, laughed, argued over toys, and shared snacks without thinking about species or history. To them, the galaxy had always been this way, messy, kind, and full of second chances. The new alliance had no grand name. People just called it the Pact. It had no capital world. Meetings rotated between systems. Its first joint project was not a weapon, but a network of schools, hospitals, and seed banks open to all. Humanity did not lead it, but humanity inspired it, because they had done the hardest thing of all. They walked away when the system was rotten, not to destroy it, but to give everyone a chance to build something better. And in the end, that was the most human thing of all.